In the confessional, Padre Pio was feared for one reason. He would not let an old soul hide behind a clean reputation. Old age does not make you innocent. It makes you accountable. If you have walked with Christ for 50, 60, 70 years, you do not get a lighter examination. Padre Pio demanded a deeper one. Do not relax. Do not assume you're safe. That assumption is how souls are lost quietly. And before you approach Holy Communion during Lent, there are sins that must be faced. Not the loud sins of youth, but the quiet sins that harden with time. Picture an elderly man stepping into Padre Pio's confessional at San Giovanni Rotondo. Bent spine, trembling hands, eyes down. He expects this to be quick. He brings the safe list, the respectable list. A few irritations, a few distractions. Nothing serious. But the silence on the other side does not move toward comfort. It moves toward truth. Because Padre Pio's confessional ministry was built on one rule, the question is never only what you did this week. The question is what you have allowed to live inside you for years. And suddenly the real issue becomes unavoidable. Say the name you refuse to forgive. Silence. Don't move past that. If a name just appeared in your mind, that is not random. That is exactly where Padre Pio would press. Because the most dangerous sins in later life are not impulsive. They are cultivated. They sit in the heart like furniture. They become familiar. They begin to feel justified. And that is how they kill the soul, while the person still looks faithful. Many Catholics over 55 believe they have moved past serious sin. You are not chasing pleasure. You are not living recklessly. You attend Mass. You pray. You give. You have endured more than most people will ever understand. But Lent is not only for those who fall loudly. It is for those who have grown quiet in their pride, quiet in their bitterness, quiet in their self-protection. Here is the first test, and you will not escape it. When you think of the person who hurt you most, do you secretly want them to be punished? Or do you want them to be saved? If your heart prefers punishment, do not excuse it as justice. Confess it, because the Eucharist is not a symbol, it is union. And union cannot happen while you cling to resentment and call it righteousness. Unforgiveness must be confessed before communion, not mild irritation, not a passing disappointment. Deep, entrenched refusal to release someone from a debt, a brother who betrayed you, a daughter who rejected your counsel, a spouse who wounded you decades ago, a business partner who humiliated you, a friend who vanished when you needed them. You replay it, you rehearse it, you defend your right to hold it, you call it memory, discernment, just being realistic. But when you approach the altar, carrying that name like a charge sheet, you are not receiving communion in freedom. You are receiving it with a divided heart. If you still call it prudence or boundaries, ask yourself one question. Would you survive if God treated you the same way? Padre Pio treated the Eucharist as fire, not a reward. It is union. And Christ will not enter a clenched heart. This is not sentimental, it is spiritual law. You cannot ask the God of mercy to enter a heart that refuses mercy to another. Now here is the second micro-delivery, and it stings because it is so common. You can be correct and still be cold. You can be orthodox and still be uncharitable. You can keep every routine and still be spiritually rigid. And rigidity is not holiness. Rigidity is often fear-wearing religious clothing. Padre Pio feared this kind of respectable coldness. Another sin that matures with age is spiritual superiority. It rarely sounds arrogant. It sounds respectable. It sounds like common sense. People today have no discipline. The church used to be reverent. Young families don't know sacrifice. Perhaps some of that is true. The moment observation becomes contempt, charity has died and pride has taken the throne. You are no longer grieving for souls. You are feeding on judgment. And judgment is a sweet poison. It makes you feel awake while it slowly blinds you. Let's make this unmistakable. When you leave Mass, do people feel encouraged by your presence? Or do they feel inspected? When your children call, do they feel safe? Or do they brace for critique? When your grandchildren visit, do they experience peace or tension? Your answers are not personality, they are spiritual indicators. Then there is the sin of constant complaint, not honest lament, not sharing a burden, but a steady current of negativity about health, politics, the parish, the priest, the culture, the weather, the way things are going. Padre Pio warned that complaining can become a reflex, and over time it reshapes the heart. It teaches the soul to look for reasons to resist gratitude, and the more a person resists gratitude, the more they resist God, because gratitude is the language of the humble. Here is a small but surgical micro-exercise. Watch your tongue for one day, not for what you intended, for what you produced. Count how many times you criticized versus how many times you blessed. If your mouth is training your home to feel tense, you are not old-fashioned, you are unrepentant. If the tongue has become a blade, the soul needs confession, not because God is fragile, but because your heart is being trained to harden. There is also despair. Not clinical depression, which deserves compassion and care, but the spiritual decision to give up hope. The quiet conclusion that grace does not work anymore. Statements like, "Nothing can change," "It's all going downhill," "Prayer won't do anything," can feel like mature realism. But they can also be surrender. They deny the power of the resurrection. They quietly accuse the resurrection of being irrelevant, and that is a sin against the virtue of hope. Padre Pio fought despair by forcing souls back into hope. Lent is a season of repentance, yes, but it is also a season of hope. To receive Christ while inwardly convinced that His grace is ineffective is a contradiction that must be brought into the light. Now go one layer deeper, because this is where the older soul often hides. There is a temptation to treat suffering as a license. After all I've endured, I deserve to be difficult. After all I gave, I have a right to be bitter. After what they did to me, I will never bend. But suffering is not currency that buys entitlement. Suffering is fire that either purifies or hardens. The question is not how much you have suffered. The question is what your suffering has produced. Has it made you more merciful or more demanding, more tender or more sharp, more surrendered or more controlling? Some older Catholics fall into the idolatry of the past. You remember when churches were full, when families looked different, when society seemed ordered. Memory becomes sacred, the present becomes an insult. But God is not the God of your preferred decade. He is the God of this moment. If you reject the present because it does not resemble your memory, you resist the place where grace is actually being offered. Nostalgia can become a chapel where you worship what was, while refusing what God is doing now. That attachment must be purified. Here is the micro-delivery that turns the knife. God will not ask you how loudly you complained about the era you lived in. He will ask you how faithfully you loved in the era you were given. You do not get to choose the century of your sanctification. You only get to choose whether you will surrender in the one you have. And then there is control. As physical strength declines, the temptation to control emotionally can increase. Using guilt to influence adult children, withdrawing warmth to punish, holding money as leverage, demanding to be served because you are tired. It may feel like maintaining order. It may feel like you have earned it. But if it is rooted in fear or pride, it wounds charity. And charity is the measure of readiness for communion. This is where men and women often differ in the form, but not in the root. For many men, control shows up as emotional distance and silent authority, stone-faced certainty, withdrawal, a refusal to be vulnerable. Strength becomes a shield against humility. For many women, control can show up as anxious overfunctioning, pressure disguised as love, worry disguised as righteousness, a need to manage everyone's decisions to feel safe. Different expressions, same root, fear, refusing surrender. And fear must be confessed, because fear that governs you will eventually govern how you treat people. Many will say, "I don't leave the house much. I don't interact with many people. How can I sin seriously?" But sin is not limited to action. It exists in intention, in refusal, in interior posture. A person can sin profoundly in silence if that silence is filled with judgment, bitterness, self-pity, or self-righteousness. Here is a dangerous truth. You can go years without scandal and still be spiritually shrinking. Your calendar can be clean while your heart becomes tight. That is why the older soul needs a sharper examination, not a softer one. Not because God is harsher with age, but because the stakes are clearer, time is shorter, the horizon is closer, the soul cannot afford to drag chains into eternity. Let me put it plainly. If you died tonight, what would you still be gripping? Anger, control, or the need to be right? Now we move, as Padre Pio would, from diagnosis to precision, because vague repentance produces vague change. Before receiving the Eucharist this Lent, examine 3 areas with brutal honesty. Is there anyone whose name you avoid in prayer because you do not want good for them? Not just, "I don't like them." Deeper, you do not want them blessed. Have you allowed suffering to make you harder instead of holier? Not just physically tired, spiritually sharp. Are you approaching communion out of habit or out of hunger? Not just, "I go every week." Do you still desire Him, or do you simply complete the routine? If you discover pride, confess it. If you discover resentment, confess it. If you discover a coldness that has slowly replaced tenderness, confess it clearly. Do not minimize it. Do not hide behind phrases like, "That's just how I am." That phrase has escorted thousands into spiritual ruin. The confessional is not a place for self-defense. It is a place for truth, and truth is what sets the soul free. Now let me give you a micro-delivery that can change everything. The sin is often not the explosion, it is the justification. I'm old, so I can talk this way. I've earned the right to be blunt. People are too sensitive now. I've always been like this. The justification is the lock. It keeps the door closed while you still call yourself faithful. Padre Pio did not tolerate excuses in the confessional. Excuses are not compassion. They are poison. They protect the disease. Mercy does not coddle what destroys you. Mercy confronts it. There is another silent shift that happens after decades of religious life. The soul becomes efficient. You know the prayers by memory. You know when to stand, when to kneel. You know how to confess without exposing anything too uncomfortable. You know how to look devout. But familiarity can become insulation. The danger is not that you stopped believing. The danger is that you stopped trembling. There was a time when the thought of receiving the Eucharist filled you with awe. Now it can feel routine, not because you lost faith, but because repetition dulls intensity if it is not guarded. And when awe fades, subtle sins grow in the shadows. So here is another micro-test. When you receive communion, do you still feel reverence, or do you feel entitlement? If you feel entitled even quietly, the heart has begun to demand what it should beg for. That needs confession, because entitlement is pride, praying with religious words. Let me make something concrete that many older Catholics never admit out loud. Comparison has replaced conversion. You measure your spiritual life by looking sideways. At least I stayed. At least I'm not like them. At least I'm better than most. But comparison is not holiness. It is self-justification dressed in church clothes. And self-justification is the opposite of repentance. Here is the next micro-delivery. You can be faithful for decades and still keep certain rooms of your heart locked. Longevity in the church does not equal intimacy with Christ. You can stand near the altar for a lifetime and still be guarding bitterness like a treasure. Lent is when those doors must open. Ask yourself something uncomfortable. If someone lived inside your thoughts for a week, would they conclude that you are becoming more charitable or more critical? Age amplifies what you rehearse internally. If you rehearse gratitude, you become luminous. If you rehearse grievances, you become rigid. This is not poetic language, it is spiritual law working through your habits. Now we go deeper into an area almost no one confesses, but many carry. The fear of irrelevance. The world moves fast. Technology changes. Culture shifts. You feel displaced. You feel ignored. That displacement can quietly turn into resentment, and resentment often disguises itself as moral clarity. But clarity without charity is not Christ. Another hidden fracture, spiritual control over God Himself. You prayed for something for years. It did not happen. Now you pray with less expectation, not because you stopped believing, but because you stopped trusting the Father's heart. This becomes a quiet bitterness toward heaven. It becomes a guarded prayer life. It becomes religion without surrender. And it must be brought to confession, not because God needs your apology, but because you need your heart back. Now listen carefully, because this is where many souls over 55 get trapped. The enemy will not try to make you a scandal. He will try to make you a respectable saint who is exhausting to live with. A person who is never wrong, never flexible, never gentle. A person who prays but cannot apologize. A person who receives the Eucharist but cannot bless their own family. That is not the fruit of Christ. That is piety without charity, and it is dangerous. So what does a mature surgical confession look like in Lent? Not vague statements, not safe phrases, precision. Instead of, "I lost patience," confess, "I have become internally irritated with my own family." Instead of, "I complained," confess, "I resist gratitude because I feel life owes me more." Instead of, "I struggle with trust," confess, "I have grown angry at God for how my life unfolded." Instead of, "I judged," confess, "I feed on contempt because it makes me feel superior." That level of clarity breaks chains, and when chains break, communion changes. The Eucharist stops being routine. It becomes encounter. You begin to receive not as someone maintaining an image, but as someone surrendering control. Now we move from confession to transformation, because Lent is not meant to leave you merely forgiven. It is meant to make you new. Here is what you will do, because souls don't change by accident. Before Mass, sit still for 10 seconds and open your hands on your knees, palms up. If your hands won't stay open, your heart won't either. Whisper, "Jesus, I release my need to be right." Then say one name you judge this week and ask God to bless them out loud. Then take 30 seconds of honesty. Ask, where did charity weaken in me yesterday? Not where you made a mistake, where love cooled, where you became sharp, where you withdrew, where you used sarcasm, where you dismissed someone, where you demanded your way. Then do one thing that will test whether Lent is real. Bring one difficult person to mind, not as an enemy, as a soul, and say, "Lord, I release my claim over this hurt. I give you permission to love them through me." You may not feel immediate warmth. That is not the measure. The decision is. The will is the altar where grace begins. This is not sentimental. This is repentance, because unforgiveness is a stronghold, and surrender is the weapon that dismantles it. Now let's be honest about why this is hard, because many older souls cling to the identity of the wronged one. It feels like dignity. It feels like protection, it feels like control, but it is heavy, and it poisons peace. Here is another micro-delivery. Being right is not the same as being free. You can be right and still be chained. You can be right and still be bitter. You can be right and still be closed. The gospel does not crown the person who is right. It crowns the person who is humble. When absolution is spoken, believe it. Let it dismantle the armor you have worn for years. You do not have to carry the identity of the wounded one anymore. You do not have to be the strong one who never bends. In God's mercy, bending is strength. And now we arrive at something your audience needs, because men and women over 55 often fear this. If I let go, who will I be? You will be lighter. You will be calmer. You will become a blessing again. Here is the paradox. The more you release, the lighter you feel. The lighter you feel, the more peace fills your home. The more peace fills your home, the more your presence becomes a shelter instead of a storm. You may not preach sermons. You may not travel. You may not lead ministries. But if you become gentle again, truly gentle, you will evangelize without words. Grandchildren remember tone more than theology. Children remember warmth more than arguments. Spouses remember tenderness more than correctness. Holiness in later life looks like calm authority, not emotional tension. It looks like someone who has nothing left to prove. This is not weakness. This is maturity. This is what it means to become like Christ. And that is why Lent matters now more than ever. Not because God is impatient, but because time is not infinite. The closer you are to eternity, the lighter you must travel. Mercy is not running out, but opportunities to surrender are not endless. The greatest tragedy would not be that you sinned. The greatest tragedy would be reaching the end, still holding what you could have released. Padre Pio endured immense suffering in his later years. He did not become cynical. He did not retreat into complaint. He did not turn pain into a weapon against others. He offered himself continuously. That is the model, not merely surviving to old age, but arriving at eternity with a heart made tender through repentance. So before you receive communion again, do not move only by routine. Pause longer than usual. Do not rush the line. Let your soul become honest for a moment. Ask interiorly, Lord, show me what I still cling to. And when something surfaces, do not defend it, do not explain it, do not justify it, don't negotiate with it. Bring it to confession, lay it down. Because the soul that surrenders late is not behind, it is refined. And the soul that refuses to surrender, even after decades, remains heavy. Open hands receive Christ. A clenched fist receives nothing except itself. Padre Pio would tell an aging soul, the finish line of life is not a place for pride, it is a place for surrender. And the soul that surrenders, even late, even trembling, is the soul that walks toward Christ unburdened, ready to meet him.